Welcome to the Money Huddle, a podcast that explores financial topics for families and small business owners. Hosted by Michael Baker and Ross Marinell. All opinions expressed by Michael and Ross or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and may not reflect the opinions of Planners Alliance. The podcast recording is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Planners Alliance may maintain positions in securities discussed on the program.
Welcome back to the Money Huddle. My name is Michael Baker, and I'm here with my business partner, co-host, Ross Marinell. Ross, how you doing?
Hey, Michael, I'm doing great. So guess what I learned today?
What did you learn today?
I learned I can drink 25 cups of coffee and not harm my heart.
Is that right?
Did you hear about this?
Only 25?
So there was a study. I'm actually
not 20 or 28, but 25.
Listen, it says I'm on menshealth.com. It says drinking up to 25 cups of coffee won't harm your heart. Says science. Your arteries will be fine.
Is that right?
So there we go. So I was like, hey, what a nice way to start today's show.
Coffee drinkers everywhere celebrate and rejoice that basically you can, it actually is true that you can put coffee in an IV now, and then basically you're fine.
I mean, 25, I don't know where were they going to stop?
I don't know, but I do know this. The coffee that I drink is relatively high octane. In fact, it's called Accelerate. That's what the name of it is. And so I would be terrified to think of what 25 cups of that would do.
You're holding out on me. I didn't know about this. I'm over here drinking regular coffee.
So okay,
putting it down.
There is a place down in Rock Hill called Knowledge Perk. They're a little coffee place, and they brew their own. They roast their own beans, I guess you could say, and they have multiple different ones. And anyway, I like coffee, but I'm not like a connoisseur as yourself would be. But I went in there one day, and this was months ago, and so I said, hey, I usually drink coffee in the morning, get me up and get me going. I'm pretty, I said I'm going to put something in it. I don't drink it black. I'm just not tough like that. So anyway, I was like, well, what do you have? And he's like, well, you should try this Accelerate. And I was like, is that what, does the name? He goes, oh yeah. He goes, it'll get you going. And I was like, all right. And so yeah, man, it's actually great. And for probably about 5 months, my Monday morning ritual was
Let's get the Accelerate.
I would drop my daughter off at school. Yeah. And I had my son with me. And before we went to daycare, we would drive down to Knowledge Perk. We would go in there. We'd watch them grind the beans, bag it up for me, and we're out the door. That was like our little thing.
Shout out to Knowledge Perk. If you're in York County, South Carolina, go check them out.
Those guys are great.
It's a cool spot.
They are great. So anyway, I have something as well. I'm always trying to, when we named our show The Money Huddle, there were lots of reasons why we named it, but the more and more I think about it, I'm like, what, you and I, we talk about sports amongst ourselves way too much to not try to find those little sport anecdotes and things. And anyway, something pretty significant happened this past weekend.
What's that?
For folks that don't follow boxing, there has been a major upset in the boxing world. The heavyweight, or one of the reasons why boxing is difficult is you don't really know who's the champ, because there's multiple champs, right. And there'll be like the 156 pound champ and the 158 pound champ. And so who's better? But anyway, the guy's name is Anthony Joshua. And I mean, he looks like he came down off
a superhero.
He looked like he looks like he came down off of Mount Olympus and decided that he was going to, box these mere mortals. I mean, he's like 6'6", 260 pounds. I mean, and he is just carved out of marble. I mean, and anyway, so this guy, he's been just like on this tear. He's undefeated, and here in the United, so I think he's British. And so he's been fighting overseas. And here in the States, we have a guy named Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder is like 6'7", big dude, big puncher. And the whole thing was they were going to build up this super fight between these two titans.
Right. So that was the ultimate goal,
and
right?
basically unify the heavyweight championship titles. Like there would be one guy that was definitively the heavyweight champion of the world. Well, anyway, this guy, Anthony Joshua, he had a fight here in, I think, New York. It might have been Madison Square Garden. I can't say for sure because I only saw the highlights. But he goes and he's scheduled to fight a guy. And the guy, his opponent that he was going to fight, I think, failed a PED test. Oh. Like he failed a drug test. Couldn't do it. So then they found a last-minute replacement. This guy, Andy Ruiz Jr. And folks, I'm not kidding you. If you haven't seen the highlights, you have to go and visually put your eyes on this fighter, because if you looked at Anthony Joshua and you looked at Andy Ruiz Jr., you would laugh. You would just laugh. Anyway, so long story short, Andy Ruiz Jr. knocks out Anthony Joshua, definitively. It was not one of those.
This
things.
wasn't like a technical knockout. He took it to him.
And so all I could think of was, that famous Mike Tyson quotes, everybody's got a plan until they get punched. And one of the analysts that was talking about the fight, they said, and I thought this was interesting. He said it looked like he didn't know what to do in that situation. A lot of professional fighters that have been hurt before in the midst of combat, they know how to cover up. They know how to tie up their opponent. They know how to try to buy time and save themselves, if you will, give themselves a chance. And they said he looks like he did not know what to do. And I thought about how many times it's like when we get into conversations with clients or prospective clients about investing, and then the market does something crazy or unexpected or emotional, or we get weird volatility, and a lot of people just they freeze up. They don't necessarily know what to do. And in fact, we were just talking with someone the other day that had an unexpected life event, lost a job unexpectedly. We've done podcasts in the past where we talked about, the early unplanned retirement, where here he was, probably 2 or 3 years out from his planned retirement date. And now he's like, well, I can't really find work. He's struggling to go back to work full time. And we got to figure out, can you retire or work part time and kind of have a phased retirement? And it's just interesting to see, that's why we think it's just so important to have a plan, but have a plan that's flexible enough that if life events happen, that you can move and adjust and adapt, and you're not just caught out there, hey, I bet it all on black, and it didn't work.
Like our Tiger Woods better. Yeah, I kind of related to, you want to have a plan for surprise,
right?
Meaning the things that can go wrong, but also the things that can go right.
Oh, for sure.
And so sometimes we were just talking about this gentleman getting knocked out, but sometimes it's now this guy winning.
Yeah,
you got to be ready to win too, and have
a
plan
point
for when you do make a lot of money in investments. All right, now what are we going to do? So we want to manage it. And
in his press conference, he said, "Mama, we ain't gonna be hurting no more."
Good for him.
So I think he does got a plan for how he's gonna spend that.
Hey,
maybe
they'll
millions.
unify the belts. Maybe he'll go out and beat this other heavyweight champ and get all the belts.
I don't know. It's definitely put some interest and intrigue back into the sport of heavyweight boxing. Although a lot of people are now disappointed because the undefeated clash of the two heavyweight titans is now off the table. So we'll see what's gonna happen.
Well, in more retirement news, kind of shifting gears, we've had our first sort of real retirement shakeup from a legislative standpoint.
Yeah, they're trying to do something
by the House.
there.
So this is sort of the retirement year, it seems like, where the Senate has a bill they're working on, and the House has just passed a bill.
I think they're searching for something that they can agree upon, so that they can try to get some type of legislation done before this election.
Right. So it seems like the year of retirement reform. And so we have our first bill. This is the Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement, or the Secure Act.
It's fun. It's like I was telling you before we started recording. I wonder if they have this little team of aides that sit around and says, "Okay, we've got this bill. It needs to have a cool name. So you guys get to work on an acronym that we can sell."
They got to have a power team working on these because They do. Every one of them has them. But there are a few components of this that may have some
so hit me with
applications.
So let's get it.
A couple of things that stood out to me. One, they do plan to increase the required minimum distribution age.
Sure.
So currently, if for your qualified assets like a 401k, 403b, IRA, you have a required minimum distribution that must be taken on your account. So whether you want to or not, at some point, the IRS says you've deferred long enough. It's time to start taking distributions. So that is currently beginning at age 70 and a half. So they're looking at pushing that back to 72. Do you think this will have much impact, Michael?
I really don't. I think that the original conversation about this was, the original conversation that I remember reading about was possibly waiving RMDs for people who had less than a certain amount of money. Let's say if you had less than like $100,000 in retirement assets, that they weren't going to, make you take RMDs. Now, of course, the government needs revenue, so I doubt that they're gonna, that would ever pass. But it was an interesting proposition, and so I think what they're doing is people are working a little bit longer, because life expectancy is increasing. So people are, tending to work a little bit longer, or they're working part-time in retirement, and they're not necessarily needing or wanting to tap their retirement assets as soon. And so I think they're trying to find a way to accommodate that. Plus 70 and a half is such a weird year to calculate. And, and we all know it because we've used it for so long, but having something definitive like, okay, it's 72 years old is when this begins. Yeah. It may clean up some things. Is it going to have this drastic impact on people's lives? I don't see it.
So that's part of the legislation is to push the required minimum distribution age to 72. It also lists the removal of the age limitation on IRA contributions. So like you were saying, people that are working later, working into their 70s, if they're working, they don't necessarily want to take a withdrawal. In fact, they may want to contribute a little bit more. So now they may be able to do that. Yeah.
That may be actually the bigger driver of it is because, a lot of times once you begin RMDs, you have to, or that age, you have to start taking the RMDs from your IRA accounts.
Right, and can no longer contribute. Yeah. So it's kind of a double whammy. So here, I think just a quick note on that is for people that are already retired, most of them, if there is a shortfall between what Social Security will provide or pension or some other guaranteed income source versus what they need, I think most folks are probably taking some kind of withdrawal from their tax-deferred assets anyway, but you never know. I mean, for some people, it'll be nice to defer.
Some people, it's interesting. Some people, that money burns a hole in their pocket, and others, like, they don't want to touch it unless the sky is falling.
Right. So we'll see how that impacts. It's a year and a half. It's not a huge change. But the other thing that's a component of this is the removal of the stretch IRA for inherited assets. So
this one's the biggie.
This is a change in my opinion as well. And so quickly just describe a stretch IRA for our listeners so they know what we're comparing it to.
So basically the way that a stretch works is when you inherit a qualified retirement account and you have a non-spouse designated beneficiary, meaning you've actually named a real person, as your beneficiary on that account, they are typically allowed to make withdrawals. When you inherit a qualified money, you have to take withdrawals. You have to take RMDs from the account. If you don't have a named or designated beneficiary, the 5-year rule typically applies, which is you have to have the account emptied out and closed within 5 years of inheriting the money. The stretch allows you to, for a non-spouse designated beneficiary, they are able to stretch that money by using a table where they take the distributions based on their life expectancy.
Right. So, for example, let's just say you inherited $500,000 of qualified funds from a deceased parent. Okay.
Yes.
So the last surviving parent passes away. You're the beneficiary on the account. You've now received $500,000 of qualified assets. So we can stretch that required minimum distribution then over that inherited person's life expectancy. So let's say you're 50. Well, you get to stretch that over your life. So you're taking a little smaller withdrawal than what
it kind of flips compounding back into the favor of the beneficiary, because if someone is older, let's say someone is, a parent who's 85 years old passes away, and they leave money to their, to one of their children that is, 55, that child, or there would be a full-grown adult at that point, we would hope, but that 55-year-old can use their life expectancy to calculate the withdrawals versus having to use the parents' age or the 5-year-old. Which
so that's the current rule. So you'd have to take a withdrawal, but it'd be a little smaller than what your parents are.
I agree.
So it's based on your life expectancy.
So this is a big deal.
This is a big deal. So now what they're saying is that same scenario, if you're going to inherit that $500,000 qualified account, it now has to be liquidated over 10 years.
Yeah, 10-year period, and
no more stretch.
Which isn't the worst thing in the world. I know lots of folks that really love the stretch strategies. I mean, we always are imploring people, make sure you name the beneficiaries, make sure you name that, just so you preserve the opportunity to do a stretch, right? Not every beneficiary is going to do that. There are some beneficiaries that are going to cash that thing out and buy the car, go on the trips, but others, they're maybe making a lot of income that don't necessarily need to cash it out.
So I think that's what something that kind of isn't always clear, right? Is that, let's say you're inheriting that asset, you're 55 years old, you're in your part of your peak earning years.
Right.
You may not want to have to liquidate a qualified account, pay taxes, federal and state income taxes on that while you're also making a significant income. I think that compounding issue could be problematic for some folks.
Oh, I think so. And quite frankly, those are the people that I think need to be really on guard about what's going on with their parents' finances and what they may or may not be inheriting, and doing that estate planning just so you can be prepared for that, because it could create some tax issues, especially if you're earning well. The other thing that we've talked with folks about is, if you got kids in college and they have been able to qualify for some type of financial aid, and then you inherit a qualified retirement account that's going to force you to take income, how does that impact the FAFSA and the financial aid that your child may be qualifying for? So this is it doesn't, for folks that are, outside the sphere of the industry that wouldn't talk about this on a daily basis, it's probably a blip on the radar, but it's actually a very significant piece of the legislation.
Key is, I think, to remember this still has to be reconciled and passed through the Senate. And so this could be one of those points that it could get a little bit more dicey.
We'll see if the Senate wants to preserve it. I think that the age that the Senate bill had with RMDs was 75. So we'll see if there's some changes. Ultimately, like you said, they're got to go to conference and they got to see if they can put together a bill that the committee feels like that their people in both chambers will pass. So we'll see what happens.
There was one more thing I wanted to bring up from the Secure Act, and that is one of the provisions allows to really promote and I think increase small employers' access to retirement plans. And so this is basically essentially allow small employers to come together to set up and offer 401k plans. So it basically be able to pool that cost and some of that fiduciary responsibility over multiple businesses, and maybe gain access to 401k plans for some of those smaller companies that might find it either cost inefficient or maybe just too much responsibility to take.
Sure. I think, this is intriguing. I think it's definitely a neat proposal. I would like to know a little bit more. And again, I've been waiting to see like what the final regs are going to look like. Here's what they're going to go take to the House and to the Senate to try to pass to send it to President Trump to sign. But the idea of allowing this, for one, you got to find out, there's so many people that just simply don't have access to a workplace retirement plan. Because small employers, generally don't want the burden of putting up a 401k. They take on fiduciary liability, and so I think this is a neat opportunity for them to find ways to allow, possibly association type plans or, multiple employer plans, where, technology can create a platform where you go plug it in. And you check these boxes and you're off and running, and I think that could be that could be great for a lot of people. So
Right.
that's a neat proposal that I actually think serves or potentially serves the little guy.
Yeah, so there's a few more changes that are coming, but I think it would be wise to wait and see what passes before we dig too deep into some of the provisions here. I just thought
there's
it was
still more
interesting
fighting to go on.
Since this is sort of the year of reform, what I wanted to do now is kind of spin this conversation to, okay, Michael, so if we were in charge of some retirement reform, what would be one or two things that you would love to see addressed through a reform proposal for retirement planning? Anything stick out that you think would be?
I have this crazy pipe dream.
Let's hear it.
Well, for one, I think it's ludicrous that, and we've talked about this, that IRA accounts don't have the same contribution.
This was my number one. I wasn't sure what you were going to say. And
we're on the same page, buddy. I think it's, so we agree.
Yeah, we do.
That we think it's ludicrous that, IRA, tax deductible IRA contributions are not at the same level as a 401k, deferred, salary contribution would be. I think right now 401k you can defer $18,000 a year. Unless you're over age 50.
Because I've thought about.
You've already got it mapped out.
Yeah. So here's the current 401k rules for 2019. You can contribute up to $19,000 of your salary.
Okay, 19. Yeah.
And if you're over age 50, you can add what's called a catch-up contribution to increase that another $6,000.
Okay.
So if you were able to, financially
25
Gs, you could save $25,000 a year through a employer 401k plan. Now that's, there could be matches and some other things there too. Now, if you have to contribute to a traditional IRA, so this is what we're talking about, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Then your standard contribution is $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
And over 50, you have a catch-up contribution of $1,000. So for a total of $7,000. Yeah. So think about this. If employee A works for a major corporation, Fortune 500 company, has access to a 401k plan, no matter what their job type is, they could save up to $25,000. Take employee B, does the exact same job, makes the exact same money, has the ability to save, but because there's no employer-sponsored plan, has to save in a traditional IRA, can only save $6,000 with the $1,000 catch-up contribution. It just doesn't make any sense.
So
we're doing all these we're jumping through all these hoops, these plans to make it easier for small businesses to form 401ks and all that stuff, when really is the simplest thing just to raise the IRA contribution limit level.
Yeah. So before anyone would send us an actually comment. And I know you know this, but we are clearly aware that you could put more money into an IRA and it just would not be tax deductible. So what we're talking about here is the apples to apples. Like you get the tax deduction, deductible, 401k versus, having the tax deductible, same bucket of in an IRA. To me, I don't know why we don't do that. I know that there are going to be people say, well, it's only going to benefit the wealthy. You know what? There are a lot of small businesses and small business owners and self-employed people that, it would simplify life a lot easier to do that. Now, again, I told you I had a pipe dream.
Right.
So my pipe dream is that we go completely portable. These 401k plans with their 10 funds in their garbage menus.
Right.
Where these fund companies, pay to be on the shelf. And how many 401k plans do we look at constantly that are just, it's basically a stack of target date funds and, a handful of random mutual funds that might be in there.
Right.
And a lot of employees don't know the fees that are inside these accounts. They don't know what they're paying. A lot of them think it's free and so what I would really like to see, and I think the technology now exists. It's just a matter of the regulatory issues of doing it. But we're creating these multi-employer like 401k plans. Right. Why can't we have like these massive PEOs like ADP, Paychex? And those are ones I know of locally here. Big ones. Whereas when you get hired on, the employer has contracted with this firm. Says, look, they run our retirement distributions. You're completely self-directed. You contribute, we'll match the They run the payroll, so they know what you're contributing. They know what we've got to match. But as far as investing, you can take that money, you can go invest it however you want, where you want.
Well, a lot's changed over the last.
And that absolves the employer. Would absolve the employer, in my opinion, a lot of their fiduciary responsibility of monitoring their plan menu and all these things that these 401k providers are getting in trouble for, and say, look, you take responsibility for your retirement, and it's basically, then it's like again, an individual account. And then when so if they had the freedom to go invest that money with whoever they wanted, wherever they wanted, then guess what? If they change jobs, they just take their portable plan and go plug it into the next one, and you resume. It doesn't create this massive, overhaul where now you've got somebody that's got 4 401ks from all the different jobs that they had, and they didn't know what to do with them. Right.
Hey, look, the 401k hasn't been around that long.
My pipe dream.
Anyway. I've been around longer than the 401k. No, yeah, I have. First one was 1978.
Yeah, you were born before then.
But just think about how much has changed over that period of time.
Oh yeah.
Right. Just how the access that people have to information, the availability to be on a platform like TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, Schwab, Robinhood.
Oh, I know.
There's a dozen.
It's so technologically advanced from where it used to be.
Right. And you could hop in, you could open an account, you could fund it. You could start, if your contribution limits were the same, then I think it'd be a lot easier way to save. Now,
here, I'll take it a step further.
Yep.
I'll take it one step further. So we know that these employers essentially know if they are signing up for these for a safe harbor 401k plan, for example, they know that if employee contributes money, they're going to be required to give a match, up to a certain amount. So they have this in their bones already. If they do profit sharing, they know what those formulas are going to be. Doesn't mean any of that stuff changes. It just means there's an aggregator. But here's what I think is cool. What if instead of this is putting again into the employee side of things, there was a place for these employees to plug into. They put their money in. The employer is going to put their match in, because you gotta have skin in the game, right? But then the employee gets to determine where those funds go. Is that money going to go towards my retirement, or can I use those funds to help me pay off my student loan?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Sound like a pipe dream now.
Well, I'm just saying. Let's open this thing up where we're talking about the benefits. You were trying to, because basically, and for any 401k provider employer that's listening. Just so you know, you might view that 401k plan as your company's plan, but ERISA views that plan as the employee's plan. That's who the plan is for. It's for the employees. And so to me, I'm thinking from the employee, like, how do we not start trying to find ways to, hey, we know that the money's going to be allocated to them, but let's teach them and educate them on how to allocate it. Because if you got a student loan that's charging you 10% interest to pay it off, hey, I'll put my money towards retirement, but can I use my employer match to help me pay these payments?
No, it's a cool idea. I think there's a lot of, but I do think just simplifying that one change, it solves so many problems. Because look, the 401k contributions are different than the traditional IRA contributions.
Yeah.
They're different than the simple IRA contributions, and the SEP IRA is a whole nother bag. And so we have all these plan variations that are intended to do the same thing, which is to help people save.
Right.
But we make it a little bit more cumbersome. It's overcomplicated.
It is.
Unify some of this. Make it easy for people to have a portable, viewable plan that they have control over. Invest in whatever the heck they want. Give them some guidelines, but let's not make this thing any more complicated than it needs to be. So that's one. I have one as well.
Okay.
Besides what you said, I would love to. Can we not have a federal tax deduction for 529 savings plans?
It doesn't really make sense that there isn't one.
We have just looking back at the security.
Well, if you're gonna complain about the high cost of going to college and student loan debt and all these other things, you should be looking at every incentive possible.
Do we not want to incentivize people as much as possible to save?
Well, I know a lot of people that don't that simply don't, because they don't get a federal tax. They're like, why? What's the benefit? And then you get into the whole minutia of like how that specific state's 529 plan may or may not benefit them, and then you get the raised eyebrow. But one thing we all typically understand as savers and investors usually is a tax deduction. Right. And so if you could say, hey, look, there's a federal income tax deduction for this,
So that's just something that sticks out because in some states don't offer even a state income tax deduction on the 529 plans. Now, the state of South Carolina does, which is our home state, which is great. So at least people making contributions to the state 529 plan, they are getting a state income tax deduction. Of course, with the 529 plan, the gains are growing tax deferred, and they can be tax-free withdrawals as long as they're used for qualified education expenses. So there are some tax benefits there. I'm not saying it's void of tax benefits, but I would step that up if we really want to encourage people to save and pay for college.
It makes all the sense in the world to me. Again, I agree with you that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I know that that is likely because each state kind of has their own 529 plan, and the federal government's like, well, but to me it's like, if we're going to really talk about this, the fact that college is becoming so expensive, then instead of like, let's just going straight to, hey, let's make college free, how about we start finding ways to make college more affordable for families that are trying to send their kids to school?
Right. So there we go. There's 2 changes we would make. We'll have to start forming our own congressional bill and get some traction on that. But I had one more story for you today. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so this was an article I came across on Bloomberg, actually, and it said migration's biggest winners and losers. So what's happening is we're starting to see, and it's been happening for years, but it's starting to really increase now, is people moving away from some of the higher tax states.
Yep.
And moving to more tax favorable states. And so Bloomberg did an article on this.
You don't say. You don't say that people are moving away from the taxation.
Yeah, and so I'm bringing this up because Florida was the big winner.
Yeah.
But South Carolina was part of the winners here too. And so I wanted to chat just a little bit about this. And so what's happening is people are moving away. The big losers were New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, California. So not surprising.
I'm just shocked. I'm shocked.
I know. And the big winners then were Florida, Texas, Washington, and then South Carolina.
Yeah.
And so this is, I guess, the way the states view adjusted gross income.
Sure.
Just for comparison, Florida was up $17 billion in adjusted gross income. In South Carolina, we were plus $2.3 billion.
Yep.
So, hey,
and we just got the Panthers. The Panthers practice facility.
Part of what's emphasizing some of these moves now is the Trump tax plan that came into effect.
The SALT cap.
Have a SALT deduction cap of $10,000. So that's state and local taxes, limited to deduction on your federal tax return of $10,000.
That's something I think will likely be revisited if there is another round of tax talks. But we all knew that was going to hit the blue states, these high tax blue states, pretty hard.
It's a tough pill to swallow. So what that means is, if you're paying state income taxes, property taxes, any local taxes over and above that $10,000 mark, you were probably accustomed to getting a federal tax deduction for those, right?
Yeah.
You were able to lower your federal income tax by
because the standard deduction was uniform across the country, but the state taxes were not. So you have a lot of people that were paying significant state taxes, but they could use that to itemize on their federal return. And that was the big argument, was that the federal government was subsidizing these high tax states by letting these taxes be their taxes be deducted. And so
so look, if you're living in New Jersey because you have an amazing job that's local, that's there, and you're making a big income, well, you're going to pay a little bit more tax. But what happens then when you retire?
Yep.
And you stop paying that job. You stop getting that big income. And you now, look, Social Security will mail your check wherever you want. If you want to move to Florida, Social Security mail your check to Florida.
Yep.
Right? Your pension check will mail it to
even if
Florida
your house is
or South Carolina.
Even if your house is paid off, you still pay your property taxes. Some of those states have weird taxes, additional stuff that you have to pay. I know New York State, there's New York State tax, but New York City has its own like tax layer that gets put it in there. So it adds up pretty quick.
I wanted to do just a little bit of research into, well, how big of a difference can it be?
Sure.
Right. If we're looking at two similar homes, for example, and we want to focus on property tax, right? Because we know your state and local taxes, part of that's property tax, and we always talk about South Carolina having a lower property tax than some other states. So I thought, well, let's just take a look. So I visited Zillow, and I looked up a couple of properties here. Michael, you ready?
Okay, let's hear it.
So I looked up a property in Fort Mill, South Carolina that's for sale. If this is your home, wonderful. I looked at 319 Forest Walk Lane, just Fort Mill, South Carolina property. It's for sale for $350,000. It's a 3,100 square foot home. Looks beautiful. Green grass, mature trees.
Is it in 29708, 29715?
29708.
Okay.
So here we have it. $350,000 home, 5 bedroom, 3 bath, 3,100 square foot home.
How big's the lot?
I don't know.
I'm just curious because, I could be in the market. You never know.
But I'm looking at Zillow and the property taxes for 2017. Take a guess. What do you think they were?
$3,000.
$1,440.
Okay.
So I was like, whoa, wait a second. All right.
That's interesting.
That's pretty low. We'll see if this is right. I'm pulling this information from Zillow.
Yeah, okay.
So, and I thought, well, let's just look at a property in New Jersey. So I found a fairly comparable home. I found
a comp.
This home.
A comp in New Jersey.
8 Blossom Court, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. 3,100 square feet, 5 bedroom, 4 bath. It's a little bit more expensive. It's $398,000.
Yeah.
But I thought, you know what? That's not that far off in price. Mm-hmm. It's 10% off or so, maybe a little bit more. But it's not that uncomparable, right?
Oh, for sure.
Pretty close.
Well, you got price per square foot.
What do you think the property taxes are on this home in New Jersey?
I'm gonna go with $7,000.
So this is tax history year 2018. Are you sitting down?
I am.
$12,457. I'm moving. Look, I love my state.
I'm out.
Maybe you're from
Peace
there.
out.
I'm moving.
Yeah. Peace out.
I can save.
They saved. Look, if
$10,000.
that couple, if they have no mortgage, right?
Yeah.
They sold their house for $390,000. They can move to South Carolina, buy the property over here in 29708, pocket $30,000 or $40,000, and save themselves $9,000 a year, $10,000 a year in taxes.
So,
that's just property tax.
So you want to know some of the reason? Now I know our folks that have already moved know this story.
It's the giant
let's look and
sound.
talk about it. So hey, look, that's it. It's creating an attraction
for sure.
For our people moving inbound. It does a lot of things for us here locally.
Mm-hmm.
It's good for our economy. It's great to have these people in this state, and I'm excited that we made the good list.
Yeah.
And so
we are actually have a great location in the Carolinas. It's hot, no lie, it's hot, but all things considered, our weather here is pretty great. The winters don't get frigid and crazy like they do up in the Northeast.
This is like a tourism guide.
We're right here. You can drive to the mountains. You could drive to the coast. We got a huge international airport in Charlotte. You're 3 hours from Atlanta, 3.5 hours from Atlanta. If you wanted to drive to the northern part of Florida, I mean, it's a great location, to live. I mean, personally. I'm biased. I'm from Carolina.
We do a lot of retirement planning here. Work with a lot of people that a few years away or a few years into retirement, and when you transition from that employment check to your retirement check, so Social Security, pension, plus whatever supplement you take from your own savings, when you can start to save $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a year in just property taxes. That's a big deal.
That's just property tax.
That's real money. That's a lot of money.
What does state income tax look like?
I don't know. I didn't do state income tax comparisons today just because I wanted to focus on.
But that's just one item.
Right. So if you're already paying, additional state income taxes, you're already over the SALT deduction, just in the property taxes alone. So you're going to see a difference in your federal income tax just from that. So that's certainly a leading factor into why I think even more people have been moving to some of these lower tax states. I'm just glad we're one of them. Hopefully it stays that way for a long time and we don't see our property taxes start to explode.
No doubt.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
Pretty eye-opening. Well, obviously one of the things we'll continue to do, and as we can, we'll update you guys on the podcast about these the retirement bills, because that could impact you if you may be potentially inheriting money. That could impact you if they change the stretch IRA rules. If you are trying to get your estate plan in order, that could also have implications for you about what money goes where. I don't think the RMDs right now is that's such a big deal, but we'll keep an eye on it because you never know. They may come out with a curveball that does change things. And as always, thank you for listening. We appreciate you tuning into the show. If you have any questions or comments or things you would like us to talk about on the podcast, you can email us at themoneyhuddle@vcplanning.com. And as always, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.